All right, so this week we're getting back into web design, HTML, CSS, and all that other business. What we're going to do is use the Photoshop document here as a guide to make the Bootstrap site, okay? And we're going to, unlike before where I kind of just quickly, I was like, hey, here's Dreamweaver, we're actually going to utilize it quite a bit more this time around in order to... we're going to leverage it a lot more in order to create the site. We're going to have it make most of the code for us, and then we will kind of go from there. Okay, so let's do this. So I'm going to have this open. You can have it open too. I put it in the things if you want, but honestly, you can see it here. So I'm just going to use this, and this is what I'm going to do in order to make the other thing. Okay, so I'm going to open up Dreamweaver right here. Now, it might, when you first open it up, it might be like, hey, you know, do you want to manage your site or all that other business? Just close out of that and don't worry about it. But get that open. I'm actually going to minimize it because I got to do other thing too. Don't mind that either. What we're going to do right off the bat is that I need to have a root folder, like a master folder that all of our stuff's going to go into, right? So, you know, our website always has one folder and then all the web pages and the CSS and the images and stuff all get thrown into there. So I need to do that. So I'm going to right click and do new folder, and I'm just going to call it cones, like that, and that's all I need to do. So just make a folder on your desktop or wherever you want to keep this website, and that's what you need to have up. Okay, now we can get into it. So after you open up Dreamweaver, go to Site. Now you can do New Site. It's the same thing as what we're going to do, but let's just go ahead and click Manage Sites. Because you can do new site right here. But I want to do manage sites just so I can show you this real quick, just in case there was any kind of confusion. So obviously, if you're a web designer, you're not going to only ever be working on one web page, right? You're probably going to have a bunch of clients, and you're going to have a bunch of different websites that you need to produce and to maintain. What this does basically is it keeps it as a list, like a library, that you can select any of your old sites, and then that will then become like the project you're currently working on, and it just makes it a lot easier. So you could select that, and then when you go to open, like after I click on this, if I do file open, it will automatically go right to the folder that this is associated with, right? So basically, it's just a library to keep track of the sites that you're currently making. So we're going to go ahead and add a new one. Well, it's a library for that, and also it lets Dreamweaver know what the root folder is, so if it does create anything, it will create it in that folder as well. So it kind of does two things. One is it keeps track of all your sites, and the other one is that it's actually attached to that as well, but the other thing is that basically it will know to put stuff in that folder that you tell it here when it makes things. And we're going to have it create our Bootstrap code, so it's going to need to know where to put those. So we're going to go ahead and click on New Site. And we'll just call it cones, okay? And then it's going to want the root folder, the local site folder, right? So that's going to be, choose root folder. So I already made cones. So I'm just going to select that folder. And then that's it. And then we'll just hit save. Boom, okay? And then we'll just hit done. Yeah, it's done. Okay. So now that's our root folder, and if you actually look over here on the files, you can see that that's like the folder that everything's in. Okay, now we can actually start making our business here. All right, so you're going to see this is going to do a whole lot for us, and it's going to be kind of nice. So we're going to go to Create New, and it's going to have all these options here. Okay, so I think before we just opened up an HTML, which is a little bit weirder to do because then you're taking in something. It's a lot easier if you just start inside of Dreamweaver, so this should be a little bit easier than what we did before. But you can see you can do a new document, you can do starter templates or site templates. So the starter template basically are these pre-made layouts that they have. I'm just going to cover these first. And, you know, they're nice, and they have these Bootstrap ones and these different ones here. Don't use those. You know, you shouldn't use them in general. And I've had students like hand in work and they just took one of these and they just threw on some pictures and it was really obvious. Especially because all of the things the way that it's all coded, it's all just generic, like, you know, section 2, like I can tell when you didn't write it. So don't do that. But anyway, that's what these are for. They're basically just starting points that you can throw your own content in or like remove out pieces. But basically, it's just pre-made websites without web pages in this case, without having all the other stuff. And then the site templates are just basically it's multi-page. Okay, so we're gonna just go ahead and do a whole new document. You can see we can write HTML, CSS, and these other things here. Most of if you've done any coding, most of the HTML and web coding is actually very simple on its face. It's just that there's a whole lot of different technologies all going in together, and that to me is like where it gets a little bit confusing. So anyway, we're gonna do HTML now. Right here, I'm just gonna go ahead and make the title. For this one, we'll just do we'll call it just cones for the title. The doc type is obviously going to be HTML, and then we can attach the CSS. I'm not going to do that. What I do want to do is that, see how it says framework none? That means it's just going to make a generic HTML document, just like how we normally start. It'll do doc type, exclamation doc type HTML, and then head, and it'll put in like some of the stuff. All that beginning chunks that we always have to write before we put our content in, it's going to throw all that in there for us. But if we choose Bootstrap, we can, we can use this, and this will actually kind of help us out. So we can use existing. We're going to have it create new, which is fine. We don't need to attach a CSS. You must uncheck this, include pre-built layout. If you turn that on, what it's going to do is it's going to create a Bootstrap site, but it's going to have like just all of the different components all just thrown in there, and it's almost going to look like one of those starter templates, but worse, because basically what it does is it throws the examples of everything in there. Now, if you want to explore and on a different thing, like, I don't know, call it like, test site or something, and turn that on so you can see what all the options are, I think that's cool, but for what we're doing now, we don't want that in there, okay? Now, the customize will allow us to adjust our columns and our grid. So if you remember, when we look at this here, right, there's columns here that we're using. And these are based off of a certain size. So this right now, this composition here is 960 width. Because it was based off of that 960 grid system. What this is going to do is you can tell how many columns you want. We're going to keep it 12. 12 is kind of the standard. The gutter is how many pixels in between each column. So just again, this is a column. Actually, when I turn this red stuff on, the red here, this is the column. These are the columns. And then this stuff in here, the space in between each column, that's the gutter, okay? So that's the space between, like when you have two paragraphs next to each other, the white space in between, that would be your gutter. And then we have small, medium, large, and extra large. So, excuse me. What small, medium, and large do is, and yours might be different, by the way, too. I just want to make a point about this, because I'll have students with the same version, and like it only has like small, medium, large, or only has medium, large, extra large, or something, or whatever. So because there's also extra small is another option that's not on here right now. So whatever. But basically, what it says is the screen will be considered small when it's 576 pixels or less, and then it'll be considered medium when it's 577 to 768, and then this one will be from 769 to 992, and then this will be, or actually I guess this would be past that. Basically, these are they're saying what size is considered small, medium, large, and what you're going to do is you're going to set up your columns, okay? And then the columns, you're going to say, when it's small, I want this element to be 6 columns wide, but when it's large, I want this element to be 4 columns wide. So basically, when the screen's really wide, it only needs to take up 4 columns, but when the screen gets squished like this, it'll take up 6 columns, so it'll take up half. So 4 obviously would be a third, and then it'll go to half, all right? You don't need to change these numbers, I just want you to see what they are, so you can leave that alone. Yours might be a little bit different, don't worry about if it is, just kind of roll with it for now. All right, let's go ahead and hit create. Now, one thing I want to mention real quick here is that if you look, you see how this says, because there's been a lot of confusion with this in general anyway. No, thank you. You see how right here it says link href, and then it has basically the Bootstrap style sheet. But see how it has this large file path? this is an absolute URL because it's not in relationship to where this is. If you see a really long file path, that means that it's absolutely looking for a specific address. The problem is this would work on your computer fine, but if you go to send it to me, your computer is not going to be users, Naj Cone, that's mine, right? Desktop, blah, 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 cones. Yours will probably be, C, users, and then whatever your name is. And so when I go to open it, it won't work. So you need to have relative URLs that just say, in the folder called blah, 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 next to me. Now, it automatically did this, and the reason why is that if you look on the top, see how it says untitled? This isn't actually saved yet. So let's go ahead and just save it real quick. So just do file, save as. And you're going to notice, if you remember in the very beginning, we did new site, we did manage sites, new site, and then we said it's this folder. So it goes right to cones. I just want you to name it index.html and then hit save. And you're going to see all of these are now going to turn to relative. And again, the reason why that's like that is that when it wasn't saved, there wasn't any, this page didn't exist. So the only way it could find, because it's a relative URL is in relationship to the file that you're in, right? So it means like, if I'm in this file, it's a folder and file next to me. But this file didn't exist, so the only way it could actually connect to it is if it was saved. Now this file exists, it can say, oh, next to this file. That was kind of why, if that makes sense. But I just want to show you this as well. So if we go to cones, which remember, all we made, come on, open up. Open up. Oh, it went over here. Okay. All we had made was just that folder. Look at what it did. It created Bootstrap for us. It added the CSS Bootstrap, right? It just wrote that code in there. And it added the JavaScript stuff. And we made this, but but it knew right where to put it. So it wrote all that code for us. We didn't have to copy anything. We didn't have to do a content delivery network, which is where you like link to an outside source. It's all right there. And it already wrote this code and even gave us some comments as to where we are, where we should put our stuff. Oh man, I didn't memorize my thing. So let's go ahead and change this right here, this untitled. Let's just call this like, cones, because that's what I want. But it automatically created all of that busyness for us, which is super awesome. Okay. All right. Now, the next thing we need to do basically is this. We need to make a decision about how we want our site. There are two types of layouts. So, for instance, if you were to look at my site here, there is what we call the container, and then we have a liquid. Okay, so here's what the difference is. A container one, where it's just the regular container. Actually, I probably have the example right in here. Where are you? Come down. Okay. So you have the container, which is the fixed width one. And basically the idea is, notice how my site, the columns always go to the here. They don't go to the end. They don't go all the way. Actually, I can probably, let me save this real quick and then exit out of this. I'm like in my thing here. So I'm just going to open up both of these so you can see the examples. Okay. So if we look at this one here, this is the fixed width one. So notice that it goes right to this edge, but there's always this big white empty space on the edges, right? And as I go to shrink this, you're going to see that the elements kind of snap. See how they're kind of clicky in a way? And then you end up with these big gaps. That is the fixed width style. The liquid style or fluid style goes all the way to the edge. See how these go all the way to the edge here? And as I squeeze, they will do a little bit of snapping, but you'll notice that the elements themselves are also fluid. So they did snap right there, right here. And they will eventually stack, but this is fluid, okay? It goes all the way to the edge. So the idea is that you can see this is using the same sort of column system that this is, right? So like you can see column, column, column. Like so, this is obviously, these are 4 columns, right? And then 4 columns, because always equals 12. I'm assuming they did 12 here as well, unless they did a higher number. More than likely they did 12. So we've got, 3 columns, then 3 columns, then 3 columns. I'm just talking about these headers here, right? These headings. And so when I squeeze them, they eventually stack or whatever, but they always have this gap. This is doing the same thing. It's the same basic, I mean, it has a sidebar here, but if you look, 3 columns, but you can see they go all the way to the edge, and they squish, 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 and then they stack, okay? So that's sort of the difference. What you're going to do is you're going to say how many columns you want your different sections to be, but but they are going to exist in either a container fluid or just a container, and one's the fixed width and one's not. I'm going to do both in this. It is normally, I would say, to be honest, you would do the whole site in either liquid or fluid, I think they're calling it here. It's the same thing, but or you would do the whole thing in the fixed width. So like if you look at mine, the whole thing's in the fixed width version. But it is possible to switch them up. I'm going to switch them up in this, but just be aware that that's what they are. Okay. So, that's what we need to do. So, first thing we need to do is we need to make a container that's going to say all of the things inside of this are going to be treated that way. So, I'm going to take out this body code. So, just so you get an idea too, just real quick here, we have the head, obviously. It already attached our stuff. The JavaScript always gets run last, so all of your code is going to happen before this JavaScript stuff. Okay, so basically everything we're going to write is going to exist right in here where it says body code goes here. That's where you want it to be. The reason being is that JavaScript, the JavaScript is going to do something similar to CSS where it has to select elements and then apply its code to them, but you don't want, the JavaScript runs wherever you place it. So if I took this JavaScript and I had it happen up before my web page, I wrote all my HTML elements, what'll happen is the JavaScript will run and it will look for like the heading. Well, the heading wouldn't exist yet because it would be after it. So you want to write the entire web page out, then have the JavaScript run, if that kind of makes sense. So anyway, just make sure everything's above it. All right, so sorry, I get kids and things. Okay, so what we're going to do basically is we're going to set up, I'm going to make my heading section, this section here, right? So basically the title and then my call to action, which is just going to be a slider. I'm going to make this the liquid style, and then I'm going to make this the fixed width style, okay? Or I think they're calling it, are they calling it liquid or, I don't know. But anyway, so that's what we're going to do. So in order to do that, you know what, actually, let's do that in the next video just because I don't want to make these videos too long. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start putting in our content, just placeholder content for now, okay?